Yeah.
Start the recording now. I'm going to try and share a PowerPoint presentation screen as well. So,
Yep.
can you see that, guys?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Yep. Do you just see the presentation screen or do you see the whole deal?
I can see, it sort of looks like I can see what you've got on your computer by the looks of it.
That's fine.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, we can see your speaker. We can see your speaker notes as well.
Okay. You probably don't need that. Might just set it like that for a moment. So are you guys busy?
Yeah, it is actually quite busy.
That's good.
It keeps all the drivers out of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do much interstate work?
Through the southern area of New South Wales, I've got a bit in there, and obviously sending stock feed to Tassie too. So there's quite a bit on at the moment.
So I'll do a little spiel about myself just to start off with while we're waiting for Patrick. So I've been with Mass Management for 2.5 years now. I previously worked at Vic Roads for 12 years in the customer service centre managing the Shepparton office, and I was engaged with Mass Management to project manage chain of responsibility into the business for the clients when it was first introduced in 2018. So I've basically been working with our clients on chain of responsibility and helping them to get processes and procedures in place to have easy templates to manage their chain of responsibility requirements. We've now stepped into a different area. We've helped a number of different councils with their chain of responsibility requirements. So we've worked with a number of councils in New South Wales. We've started to work with some of the water authorities now for their chain of responsibility requirements, and we've just had some inquiries with Victorian Fisheries Association. So this is completely sort of outside the areas that we thought we would be helping clients with, but because they all have heavy vehicles as part of their business tasks, then they obviously need to comply with their requirements, chain of responsibility as well. So yes, it's been quite interesting. We've helped a lot of clients with prime contractor audits. So a lot of our clients work with bigger prime contractors like Hanson and Linfox and those sort of people. And one of the requirements that they have is that they do external audits on their subcontractors, and we've helped a lot of our clients with that requirement and meeting the level of compliance that those sort of people want for their subcontractors. Cool. So do we want to go ahead and start, or do we have any questions to start off with?
No, I'm happy to start.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we should just start, and Patrick can jump on when he can and catch up later.
I can see Patrick.
Patrick's
Thank you.
there.
Oh, is he?
Oh. Hi,
Oh, there he is.
Okay. So basically, chain of responsibility laws were amended under the heavy vehicle national law back in 2018. In effect, these laws mean that if you operate a vehicle over 4.5 tonnes, GVM, registered to drive on public roads, you must be compliant with a suite of laws, regulation standards above that of the everyday sort of road user. So the requirements really are designed to promote road safety, to manage impacts of heavy vehicles on environment, road infrastructure, public amenities, promote industry productivity and effectiveness for road transport of goods, and encourage effective innovation and safe business practices. So this chain of responsibility change is around what's reasonable and practicable for you to do, what you have control and influence over, and is much now aligned with the work health and safety provisions of identifying what your heavy vehicle risks are and putting controls in place to manage what those risks are. So previously what would happen, enforcement really only ever happened on the roadside where drivers would get pulled up. If they were had an offence, then obviously they would get charged for that offence. Now with the new laws, it's all about shared responsibilities for all parties and being able to demonstrate that you have safety systems in place. So enforcement now have some more powers under the chain of responsibility changes. So they can actually now go into any business at any time and investigate that you're managing your safety requirements. Normally this only happens if there has been an accident or incident or a roadside interception where there's been major issues and they've found that they needed to go investigate that company. But we're finding that enforcement are now coming into businesses and investigating that, you know, they're managing their drivers' fatigue and they're keeping appropriate records for maintenance. Those sort of things is what they're asking for. And along with these changes, obviously they've changed or increased penalties. So if we want to start from the very bottom, we have helped a lot of clients with improvement notices. So what they will do is they'll come into a business and they'll say, you're not managing your driver's fatigue, you're not keeping records of local hours, you're not meeting the requirements. You need to demonstrate that requirement. And so they will give a company 3 months to basically get their ducks in order. Each month they will request a report on how they're complying with the requirements and what they're doing to ensure that they are getting their standards up. And then they will sign off that improvement notice. If they're not happy with the outcome of that, then they can start issuing offences or breach notices for companies. It's category number 3, breaches of safety duty. So that's basically if you are not managing your safety requirements at all. So if you have no evidence that you have policies and procedures in place, train drivers, those sort of things, they can actually just issue offences in relation to that. Category 2 is more if there has been an incident or accident where they find that you're not doing enough in that safety space. And category 1 is more if you've purposely or recklessly done something in that space. So if you've known that a truck was overloaded or if you knew that a driver was out of hours and you still let them do that job, then you can then be under the offence of category 1. You guys would deal with the National Heavy Vehicle Register a little bit with your accreditation stuff, so you know they're based in Queensland. They were established back in 2013. They're basically a statutory authority that's quite independent, but they're supposed to minimise compliance burdens across the state and harmonise, which they're having trouble doing because all states still have their own laws and requirements, as you understand. So the chain of responsibility framework, basically there was a legislation or the law change that happened. At this stage, WA and Northern Territory aren't part of this, just purely because of the logistics of their space. Then there was a registered industry code of practice called the Code. That was a practical guide that was developed by Australian Logistics Council and Australian Trucking Association in how to achieve the standards of the legislation. That's about a 360-page document if anyone's ever had a look at that. So it's quite a big practical guide. Along with that, then you have your policies and procedures, and then under that you just have your day-to-day operational practices, which is just your documents or your templates that show that you're managing your safety requirements. So safety management plan is probably the overarching document or policies and procedures that you need to have in place to demonstrate that you're managing your safety obligations. I presume everyone would know what a safety management system basically is. It's basically what you do to identify the risks in your business, what the policies and procedures are that describe how you are managing the risks, and what records and documents you have to actively review and manage the risks, and then obviously the training and induction of drivers and employees accordingly. And the other set of documents then is doing the risk assessment on your business. So having some document that identifies what your risk is, what the likelihood of it occurring, what the degree of harm is if it does occur, who knew about the risk, how do you remove the risk, so what's your controls, what are the costs appropriate to the risk, so it's no good investing in all this technology if your risk is quite low, and how do you know controls are working, so your overall reviewing and monitoring non-conformance, all that sort of stuff.
Would you like to put your screen on full PowerPoint presentation? We'll be able to see the slides a little bit better.
Yeah, I tried that, but I think it's moving to a wrong screen. So you're not actually getting my full screen. It's going to a different screen. So yeah, I don't think that helps, does it? Because my full
really.
screen's actually on my other screen over here. So it's not, yeah, I tried to set it up this morning and it's not working properly. I apologise for that.
I think just going forward to help is that I've heard it said that, you know, for PowerPoints on Zoom meetings, it's best to save your PowerPoint as a PDF rather than a PowerPoint, and that will actually allow you to.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So anyway, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for us, but just for you going forward, I think if you save it as a PDF, you cure that problem.
Thank you. And I can send this to you as well, so that you can have a look at the presentation as well. So part of chain of responsibility is basically allocating responsibilities and understanding who is a partnership in the supply chain. So everybody from the director to schedulers, loading managers, maintenance managers, drivers, administration staff, anyone that has a role in the heavy vehicle task is part of the supply chain and should understand what their safety responsibilities are as part of their job role. And this is just a bit of a snapshot of what sort of roles and responsibilities managers and directors and schedulers should have, what loaders should have, and obviously what drivers should have as well. So under chain of responsibility, we've sort of templated what we know the known risks are in transport. And so we know that fatigue is one of the major risks. So do you guys, all your drivers, fill in national driver work diaries, or do they have local work record books? Or?
We've got local daily run sheets that all our drivers fill out.
Yep.
Plus they've got all their own books as well that they carry for long distance work that they required to fill out as well.
Yep.
And that gets processed on a daily basis.
Yep, nice. So you would file the records in driver and date order, and you would check them for completeness and compliance.
Yep, they're checked every morning, and then they're also at the end of the month, everything's then entered into a database in our system.
Very good. And do drivers do a pre-drive check to validate, you know, I'm fit and healthy, I've got enough hours to do my job, I'm not affected by drugs and alcohol, I've got a current license? Do they do that?
Yeah, so all those tick and flick stuff that they've got to record is on their pre-starts before they start for the day.
Yep.
Yep.
No worries, excellent. Do you do any medicals with your drivers at all?
Not as such at the moment, no.
Okay. And do you have...
If they are feeling unwell on that though, we ask them not to come to work and follow up with a doctor.
Yep. Yep. So I guess there is that industry best practice sort of scenario where, you know, you would have a health and safety policy for your drivers. You promote healthy lifestyles. That you would probably get a pre-employment medical from drivers once they start, just to know that they're fit and healthy and there's got no pre-existing condition that you need to manage or know about. And that if you do have concern about a driver at any point, whether they have a medical event or they go off sick for a period of time, that you would get some sort of medical clearance to get them back in the truck, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we do pre-employment medicals. That's a condition for everybody that works here.
Yep.
And then if they've had an injury occurred, whether outside or inside work hours, we always follow it up with medicals.
No worries. Awesome. So this just talks about, the meaning of what a fatigue-related vehicle is, where you are legally required to maintain the documents. So any vehicle with a GVM or GCM over 12 tonne. And the fatigue hour requirements are when they're required to take their rest breaks. You guys are just on standard hours, aren't you? You don't have a BFM accreditation for extra hours for your drivers?
And just normally standard working hours.
Yep. No worries. Distraction. So we know that obviously distraction is a fairly big risk in drivers and road accidents. So I guess it's important just to have some sort of distraction policy or procedure or an understanding of what you expect your drivers to do. So, things like obviously the phone requirements, placing items in easy reach, securing items, setting navigation equipment, taking breaks rather than eating while driving, and setting controls before you leave, just standard sort of stuff that you would expect a driver to do. That one's pretty straightforward. Speed. So obviously speed's a risk, and it is important to have some sort of speed policy or requirement and a non-conformance process if those sort of things are detected. So I presume that you would have some level of policy, you'd induct your drivers into it. Very difficult unless you have some GPS monitoring to know what drivers are doing. But at least if you have a policy that you do have a non-conformance report if drivers are detected speeding, that you would write up a non-conformance report with them and have a chat to them if there are detected speeding. And then you would have a consequence process that, if you catch them speeding 3 times in a row, that, they have some consequence of that. Yeah. The only other thing with speed is speed limiters. So your trucks, I presume, would be fitted with the speed limited requirements, and that you have records that they are maintained or checked at least every year during your service program. Mass dimension limits. So you do many heavy vehicle loads, or they're fairly standard type loads?
Most of our standard loads, like the standard load on a truck, would be about 27 tonnes, which probably brings the truck up under probably 45, 46 tonnes gross.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of stuff that they do is high mass, yeah.
So with your mass accreditation on your trucks, pretty much that will be managing this requirement, because you have standards that you need to comply with. You need to validate your weights before you go on the network. You need to have a weigh assessment process where you know what your weights are, and you calibrate that process. You train your drivers, those sort of things. So with all that sort of happening under the accreditation requirements, you're really sort of ticking off the requirements for meeting your mass and dimension risks. Vehicle standards. This just really covers off things like doing your pre-drive checks, having a fault report process, managing your services so you know that they're not missed, and that any repairs or maintenance has been done by a qualified person, that you have a process of ensuring that your trucks are registered at the right configuration and those sort of things. So you mentioned that you have a pre-drive check, so that's good.
Yep.
Do you have a way of, if there is a fault reported by the driver at that time or during the journey, that they document that fault, that they schedule repairs and that fault gets closed out somehow?
Yeah, they do. That's on their also on their pre-start checks that they'll list any faults and they'll raise it with me. Doesn't matter how significant or minor it is.
Yep.
And then from there, we won't leave them leave the yard until our maintenance department have had a look. And then from there, if we can fix it, we can. If not, it goes to down to the service centre in Shepparton to have the repairs fixed.
No worries, and that's all documented and closed out. So yeah, if a driver got into that truck the next day, he would understand that there's no outstanding faults and that there's evidence.
Yeah,
of
that's right. Yep.
Yep, perfect. Scheduling of services, is there a process to know when services are due, and a way of scheduling those and the records of the scheduling being done and what's checked during the servicing?
There's not really anything that I know of at the moment. The drivers normally let me know when they're coming up to a scheduled service, and then I will have them booked in for a service prior to reaching that many allocated kilometres.
Yeah. I guess the main things is that you can demonstrate that you don't miss any scheduled services or maintenance requirements. That you comply with the manufacturer standards with the timeframes and the repair processes. That's sort of the main thing, I guess. And then ongoing to that would be the payment of the registration, make sure that the register currently up to date, those sort of things. Do you have a spreadsheet, or do you have a Vic Roads account or something that you can use to validate that your regos are current?
Yeah, we pay all our registrations on an anniversary date every year.
Okay, so you've got a common expiry date. Yeah, nice. That's good, because that's easy. That just ticks it off in one foul swoop, I guess. Nice. Non-conformance reports. So I guess it's they're monitoring and reviewing and making sure that your current systems are working to the required level. So I presume you would have some sort of incident or accident reporting process, non-conformance process where people would document if things go wrong, that they get investigated, that there are outcomes that then get communicated to relevant people on how the occurrence will not occur again, those sort of things. Yep. So do you guys... Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Do you guys use subcontractors at all?
For driving the vehicles, yeah, there's, I think we've got one that will may call on a case-to-case basis.
Right. So there still is under
responsibility. Hang on a second. I think there's a potential confusion here about what we actually mean by subcontractors. So there's people that will come in and actually drive our trucks on a casual basis, like Ringer, who he's with us, he's driving our truck, and he's under our employ. Subcontractors in this context I take as being anybody we can sign a job to. So if we get Baxters or the line people or whatever it is to bring product into us, they're effectively subcontractors to us. So we have, and I dare say we'll talk more about this as we sort of go through, but I think they're actually involved in chain of responsibility, and we've got an obligation to sort of make sure that we've got the right checks in place to ensure they're compliant with chain of responsibility. Is that right?
Exactly right, yeah. So if you are engaging with subcontractors, there is a level of requirement to ensure that they're complying with the requirements, and you have responsibility to do that. So how do you do that? It's very difficult. When you're talking about your casual drivers, that you, I would presume you're saying that you basically you induct them into your systems completely anyway, as if they are a full-time employee anyway. So they would get or would need to comply with all the requirements that your normal full-time drivers would. So that's good. But yeah, third parties, depending, I guess, on the relationship you have with them. I mean, if you use them all the time, you know, they're reputable, they're a low risk in a sense to your business. What do you get from them? Look, it might be as simple as getting some sort of chain of responsibility acknowledgement that they sign to say, yes, we have chain of responsibility processes. You know, we will supply roadworthy vehicles to you and train drivers. We will make sure that that we have policies and processes in place, and then there will be a non-conformance process if they do end up turning up to your place of business with an unroadworthy vehicle, that you would report them with a non-conformance report, and they would need to follow up on that and let you know why that happened and why that wouldn't happen again. You could go down the lines of also doing audits on them. As we were speaking a little bit earlier before, we have some clients that use a lot of subcontractors in the logging industry. So they actually, every year, they pick 10% of their subcontractors, and we go out there and do an audit on them to validate that they're running their compliance to the standards that's expected. So yeah, I guess it depends on your relationship and what you get from them.
So what about the distinction between where we consign somebody to bring something in? So third party go and pick this up, bring it to our site, versus actually buying materials on a delivered basis. So we'll use a supplier. Can you actually deliver this to our site? Is there any practical distinction from within that as far as chain of responsibility is concerned?
Not really. I guess it depends on the level of how much responsibility, because if you're actually engaging them to do loads for you in the sense that I need you to take this load to this place at this time, that's a little bit more responsibility, because you're giving them specific scheduling sort of requirements. Where if you have someone that just delivers things on site to you, that's, you know, less responsibility in the sense that you're not consigning them specifically for a task. They're just someone that brings supplies into you. Yeah, so it's sort of a different level of engagement, I guess. So it's a different level of responsibility.
But I think, and the reason I bring that up, I see it as the same, and it's something we actually need to sort of wrap our mind around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's say we ran Coles up today to deliver a load of donuts for lunchtime. Yeah, we got very little or zero chain of responsibility issues when it comes to Coles delivering. Now, if the guy comes in and he's off his chops, we wouldn't let him back out on the road, or his tyres are bald or whatever happens to be. You know, I think we have an obligation there. But not. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. If we actually said to you know, Tash Davis Transport, please go around and pick up a load of donuts for us from Coles, we're consigning Tash in that instance, and we ought to have the checks in place. That's right, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. It's all about what you have influence and control over, and what's reasonable and practicable. If Coles are bringing donuts to you don't necessarily have a lot of influence or control over that person. However, if they do come in and you see something that's not right, technically any inaction of what you do can also be perceived as not complying with the requirements. So you knew that that truck was not roadworthy, or you knew that that driver looked under the weather, and you didn't do anything about it. I mean, what do you do about it? You can't really sort of say, don't leave the premises, but you can report it. So yes, I wasn't happy with that. I reported it to Coles. Here's the evidence. They said that they would investigate it and they will make sure that that doesn't happen again. Tick, you've ticked off your level of responsibility. However, if you then engage with someone that you said a consigned load needs to, you need to pick up the donuts and bring them into us, and they're not complying, you have a little bit more responsibility with, I guess, that company. But it's the risk and compliance environment is very difficult because it's not black and white. It's very grey area. It's about you being comfortable, I guess, with your level of compliance and being able to demonstrate, you know, this was what we did. this is how we did it, and we were comfortable with that, and we've had no ongoing occurrences, so we think our systems are working, and we review them all the time. That's sort of how you would then manage, I guess, your chain of responsibility requirements. The only other thing really that I would like to touch on, I guess, is induction and training with drivers. So I would presume that you would induct all your drivers into your policies and procedures, that they would get copies of them, or at least know where your policies and procedures are as part of their induction. You would get driver licenses from them, or at least a copy of their driver's license, and maybe you would get a license printout as well from them to validate, number one, they have a current license, and number two, they have the right endorsements on their license. That would be something I presume that you would do.
Yeah, I do that when I do the inductions of all new employees. I get a copy of their license and all qualifications. And then I upload that into our WHS system.
Oh, yep, great. Do you do any ongoing license checks of current drivers? Like every year you get a copy?
In the system, I have it set up that 2 months before the expiry of their license,
Yep.
that it lets me know that their license is due for renewal. But
Yep.
every month I go in and just check to see, if anything's coming up for renewal or if anything's out of date, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I just go in and check it monthly.
And do you do any printouts to validate they've got current licenses? Because seeing, even visually seeing a driver's license doesn't necessarily show that it's current. It hasn't been suspended for demerit points or cancelled. Do you do any sort of validations?
No, I don't.
License? Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, probably a good idea at some point. The expectation is you're putting drivers in your trucks. How do you know that they're actually licensed? You have an obligation to do something in that space. But what's reasonable and practical, you can't check it every day. But if you, at least in your pre-drive, your driver checks, yes, my license is current. Your policy says you must tell me if your license gets cancelled or suspended. And then once a year, you get a printout from their license authority. I think that would tick off that's reasonable and practicable for you to do. We know that that's very, there's lots and lots of heavy vehicle driver licenses out there that are not current or suspended, especially with the way demerit points are going, and you can lose a lot of demerit points quite quickly, especially with mobile phone offences and those sort of things. So it's probably a good idea to do those sort of checks. We talked a bit about medical, so I think I'm happy with that one. Driver assessments. So if you do get a new driver, I would presume that you would buddy them up with someone experienced in the business to give them the ropes, tick off that they know how to do their pre-drive check, they know what they're checking on the vehicle, they know how to load the vehicle and restrain the vehicle, that they also know how to drive the vehicle. So you would probably do that as part of your induction process. Is that correct?
Not part of the actual employee induction, but they are buddied up with the driver, obviously, because they need to know the routes on how to get to the farms, etc.
Yeah.
So they are buddied up, yeah.
Yeah, so probably a good idea if you do that sort of buddying up, that you document that somehow to tick off that your new employee knows the ropes, I guess, and has the required skills to do what you're asking him to do. It's probably a good idea to have some sort of assessment document done in their records before you let them go out on their own. It just, as I said, validates that, before you put them in the trucks, that you know that they're trained up and they're good to go.
Yeah, we're actually doing it, documenting it's another thing, and actually then wrapping into that documentation the the chain of responsibility aspects, as opposed to just being able to load and blow off stock feed. So I think that's only a small tweak task that we can actually make there.
Yep. And I would presume you would also have training registers that you would keep for your drivers as well, that ticks off what licenses they have and what training they've done, and when they need their refreshers and those sort of thing that they've done, fatigue awareness training or manual handling training, or your sort of basic stuff that they should be doing.
Yep.
Cool. No worries. So I guess as a final deal, part of our chain of responsibility program that we offer to clients is providing them with all the templates to manage this. It sounds like you guys really have a lot already in place anyway, which is really good. The other things that we do for clients is we can do a gap evaluation of what you're currently doing and put in some recommendations if you think you need to have a bit of a health check done on your systems. We also offer a monthly update sign up where we provide ongoing monthly COR and training module updates. So each month may be a specific risk subject. So we might talk about fatigue. We would give you some reminders and review processes, a checklist of what you should be doing, a little fatigue awareness training PowerPoint presentation with a little assessment at the end that ticks off that you've trained your drivers and that they understand what fatigue is and what means if they're affected by fatigue and what the risks are. But that's sort of the thing that we're supplying clients to help them with their ongoing compliance requirements. Cool. I've sort of ticked off everything I was looking at going through. Did anyone have any questions?
There's one area that's not come up yet. We have basically a cellar door, a retail store, where farmers will come in on a ute or a ute and a trailer and collect product ex our store, bags of stock feed, and then whiz off back to their farms. How do we go for chain of responsibility in that area? So it's customer comes in, we load him with a forklift, and he zips off out on a farm ute, which sometimes aren't necessarily the best things in the world.
It's a bit of a difficult one because they're considered light vehicles, so they're not really part of chain of responsibility. However, we have dealt with a lot of gardening sort of places where they do have those sort of things happen. They have a lot of their gardening clients have big trucks, but they also have little trucks, or there's mum and dad that come in with their, their tandem trailer that hasn't been used for years and years and years, and they want to load up, a ton of product on it. It's quite a difficult one to manage. I guess the sort of recommendations we do is that it's good to have good signage, I guess, to say to clients, make sure that your vehicle is in a roadworthy condition, otherwise we may not load you. We will only load you to the maximum requirements of light trailers, so whatever that happens to be, 750 for a single and 1 tonne for a tandem, or whatever sort of combination they're running. There are clients too that also put some declaration stuff on their invoices or their receipts to say you need to make sure that when you bring in your truck and trailer, that they're in a roadworthy condition, that you cover your load before you leave, and they put that provision in their receipting sort of process. So at least there's a declaration document of some words to demonstrate that. We have that happen a lot with clients who have their own weigh bridges. They'll actually put that declaration information on their weighbridge tickets to say that we will only load you to the legal limits, and you must comply with A, B, and C, which at least is something, I guess. We have worked a little bit with councils who have standpipes where they have a lot of clients filling up the water for their use, and that's a hard one because that's not even that's not an unmanned site, so they have no eyes on it at all, but they still are providing that service, so they still have that level of responsibility. So that's where they put some really strong sign on there, and then when they have clients signing up to get their key, to get their standpipe, they sign a notice to say, yes, we will only load to the requirements, and we will provide, we'll make sure that our vehicles are in good condition, and that sort of at least is something that ticks off that they have some document to state that requirement.
So
Well, I'm on-
sorry. The only other thing I thought of was, we might have been brought up while I wasn't here, but we run a public weighbridge.
Yep.
And if someone comes into our public weighbridge overweight, what's our responsibility? Because we don't necessarily have the facilities to unload stuff off them.
Yeah, that again is a difficult one. We have, I would probably again go down the lines of putting some sort of, you would have fairly big signage to validate, you know, we will need to ensure because you don't actually load them.
No.
And so you don't have any responsibility in loading them or unloading them. They're just purely using your weighbridge. So yeah, it's a very difficult one, because what control and influence do you have over that process? I guess it will still be that you would need to have some level of signage to validate, you know, ensure your loads are to the legal limits, and make sure you have processes if it's not. But you don't have any influence or control over that other than they're using your weighbridge.
Yeah.
I mean, you can write them up. Is it a manned weighbridge?
Yes, it is a man
Yeah.
full time.
So when they go over it, you can see if they're overloaded.
Yes. So we have trained weighbridge operators that handle that. It's just more if they do come in and they're purely getting a weight, you know, there's not really much they can do if they're overloaded and they can't unload here necessarily. You know?
Yeah. I know the people like GrainCorp and those sort of people. It's a lot of it. It's different because the product goes in there, and they would issue that client a non-conformance, or if they are overweight, they would not pay for that component of the load. They would donate that to charity. So there's no incentive for anyone to overload. But you don't have any of that sort of control. The only thing you could probably do is maybe give them or cite them as a non-conformance. When you come in with an overload, you'll get a non-conformance breach from us. If we're really concerned about the weights that you're bringing in, that we might, have to tell authorities, I don't know what line you want to go down, but at least if you have some sort of tick off or something that says, you were overloaded at this point, are you doing something about it? Because if you keep bringing in trucks that are overloaded, you may not be able to use our weighbridge, because we want our clients, or we want people to be safe.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So say we have a truck coming to use our public weighbridge that's loaded with hay and is overweight. So you're saying that we've got no control over that, but we're signing a document to say that he's overweight. Isn't the responsibility back onto us if he gets a public weighbridge ticket from us? Or am I missing the point? Like, we can't turn him back out on the road and say, yeah, you're fine to go, if we know that he's overloaded, knowingly send him out. And as Pat's saying, we don't have the facilities to unload, 20 bales of hay off a truck. It's not really our responsibility as that, but we can't send him out on the road either.
Yeah.
So that's probably your grey area, but that's the kind of clarification that we kind of need coming up to harvest, and we're going to have hay moving around and things like that. But that's one thing that I'd like to get some clarification on.
Yeah, again, as I was saying, it's not a clear process, and it hasn't ever really been challenged in court. If you do let an overloaded truck on the network, are you part of that non-conformance or that breach? Whereas, what control and influence do you have, and what facilities do you have to unload him? You haven't engaged him, you haven't given him that load to do. All you're purely doing is supplying a weighbridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. But
yeah.
Sorry, go, Adrian.
Sorry to hear. I was about to read what you're about to say. Yeah, that's exactly right. They're coming in off the street.
Yeah.
They're doing it. We're actually not sending them away. By the same token, we're not retaining him. I'm just wondering a practical solution in this, and we'd have to go back and see how many times this actually happens.
Yeah.
is why don't we have a carbon copy non-conformance book for these sorts of eventualities up in the Weybridge? That's, you know, basically, hang on, you're overweight, mate, you know, sort of, you know, date, time, registration, driver, we sign it, we've got a copy retained, we give him a copy along with his Weybridge ticket, and probably even get him to sign the damn thing that he acknowledges the fact that he is overweight. That wouldn't, you know, that wouldn't be on the wit, be beyond the wit of man. And if we do it 5 times a year, that would probably better haul us up, I suspect.
Well, that's
But
right.
we're not in the game of unloading hay and stuff for people, are we? I mean, sort of he needs to go, and then again, we don't want to solve everybody's problem for him. He needs to go back to the nearest convenient spot to actually make that adjustment. Whether yeah. But most of this stuff is local as well. You know what I mean? But
Yeah. So you know the people that go and use your Weybridge. So you would get a bit of a feel if someone's doing lots of loads that are overweight or non-compliant. The other thing is it's quite difficult to even know what an overweight is. Do you do just the gross weight, or do you do axle group weights? You know, because they can be compliant still in their gross. However, their axle group might be over. Is it a single plate Weybridge?
So for public ways, we generally only do a gross weight, like their full weight. We don't actually check their axles, so that's the only one we're going to know that's overweight there.
Yeah.
It's only for our trucks that we check.
I mean, we're not compliance people in the sense that you get hauled up on the side of the road from that point of view, where we're doing actual groupings. You know, we're providing a service, so we're allowed to under the NMI. I think without turning a blind eye to it, I think we limit our engagement to saying, yeah, that's your weight. If you're overweight, we will consider, you know, a formal notification in the sense of a docket book that sort of says that. Yeah, or if we're giving him a Weybridge ticket anyway, you know, maybe the next round of Weybridge books, you know, has on there that overweight or whatever, or there's a comment box or whatever, you know. It's
exactly, and maybe even some sign that says, you know, you must ensure your load's compliance to your allowable limits, and, you know, just have a few little safety signs there as reminders to people. Again, that's right. Except that we'll have more signs and plant before we sort of finished, if you know what I mean. That's the risk. No, I think that's the way to go with that. The other bit that we do is, you know, we sign up to the harvest scheme that gives grain growers a bit of tolerance when they come across the Weybridge, but we still also have a non-conformance process in place for people that are overloaded with grain. We haven't gone to, I'm fully aware of the Grain Corps one. We've not gone to that step yet where we just don't pay for the overweights, but in reality, how many times would we really see an overweight, you know, across the Weybridge, or more importantly, how many times would we see serial offenders across the Weybridge? We got reasonable control on that. Yeah, and I guess that's where you would then do the risk rating of, you know, is this a big risk to the business? You know, what sort of controls do we need to put in place? If it's a really low risk, then it's probably simple controls so that you can at least demonstrate that you're aware of it and that you have something in place. But that would be where you would just have to, I guess, have a look at what historically you've had, and what the risks are to the business. No worries. Is there any other questions? Did it sort of make sense?
Oh, I think it makes sense. The bit is about to socialise, so everybody's got a set of eyes on it.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense in the sense, we know this. It's about living and practicing with it. a couple of tweaks that will come out of this will be useful, like license checks. I suspect, for example, we are better than we would describe about the maintenance of our trucks. Whether we codify that well, in the sense that the risk of this is something goes wrong on the road and a whole load of people in uniforms turn up through the gate.
Yep.
Well, the first 10 or 15 minutes about how that conversation, where we end up depends on the first 10 minutes of conversation.
Yeah.
If you put your hand on this, that, and the other, it demonstrably we're doing the right thing. That's probably a good start to a conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you can say, the things they'll be asking for will be, how are you managing your driver's fatigue? Well, we have daily run sheets. They're filed in driver and date order. We get them audited. It's part of our ongoing process. Drivers work reasonable standard hours, so it's a low risk to the business. We've had no incidents of anything happening. Our maintenance schedules are, I can pull records of 12 months of servicing on any particular truck. You can demonstrate when the brakes were last checked, and all that sort of stuff will be what they would be asking. And if you're comfortable that you can do that, then you're definitely in a really good spot.
I think you'd be like that pilot they had on the Eastlink there about 6 months ago. That bloke in that Porsche seemed to be the worst offender in the world, didn't he? It seemed like he's going to end up some community service.
Yes.
Within an hour or two, they said they were investigating and they've got the driver of a truck under arrest.
Right.
Well, the stuff that's come out about that is all chain of responsibility.
Absolutely. Yep. So
he'll be sharing a cell with the Christchurch bomber, I suspect, for an awful long time. The police knew within minutes, I reckon, that company and that driver had got hell. There was going to be hell to pay.
Yep, but they've further investigated that company and gone in and talked to the operations manager, and now the operations manager's got 4 counts of manslaughter. So they've gone down that line. So that operations manager would have had some idea that driver was fatigued, some idea that driver was under the influence. So and still let him drive the truck. So that's where he's now become part of that chain and now has the offences against him because he's knowingly let the driver do all those things.
There are people going to do serious time over that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's right. Bang on all morning about it, but from my point of view, I think this is good to socialise this sort of stuff. We know it. We've got a few tweaks about it. I think we can get a bit more relaxed about the hay bales, but follow it up with a bit of process.
Yep.
I still do have concerns about the utes and the trailers driving out of our yard with unsecure loads.
I know. I don't know, is there many? Do you think that's a big thing that they don't secure their loads at all? They don't have the right equipment, or they just don't know that they need to?
Well, there's some of them. I saw a good example yesterday. It was going out of the gate, and everybody would have seen it if they had actually looked. There's a ute. It's just got a tray on there. There's no size on the tray, and he's got 2 bags. You've got 2 bags of our stock feed.
All right.
On checker plate.
Yep.
Now is that actually going to fall off? Us all being good country people will say, nah, that's right, isn't it? Who's to say one of those 25 kg bags didn't fly off and hit a kid waiting to cross the roundabout in Nathalia?
Yeah, exactly right. And then they would come and say, well, why did you let that load leave if you knew that it wasn't tied down? It's a long way down the chain, but what do you do?
It's too big. In a way, I see that. I see that as, and everybody else can sort of join in. I almost see that as our biggest risk, is something flying off in a kid off a trailer or a ute.
Yeah.
As much as it is about anything that's our trucks are going. If our trucks are involved in a genuine accident, they're involved in a genuine accident.
Yeah, and accidents.
There'll be nothing to see here. I think we've got a pile of work to do in terms of people we can sign work to, third-party hauliers, to make sure that they're compliant. So it's no good just ringing up old mate around the corner and saying, can you go and get this? Everybody that we engage to bring raw materials into us as a third party that we're giving the job to.
Yes.
We need the right checks and probably the right ongoing and follow-up checks.
Yeah, so we've got a third-party templated letter and acknowledgement document that I can email that just has a bit of a spiel on what the law is and what the expectation is as a company. You know, safety is important. We engage with you because you need to comply with the requirements of all the listed risks, and then on the back they sign it to say, yep, you know, we've got roadworthy trucks and trained drivers and we have current policies and procedures, and they sign it. At least you've got something to validate, well, you know, they've signed off that they have some level of compliance or understand what their requirements are, and then you would maybe get that off them once every 12 months to validate that it's still current. And then, you know, the letter says at some point we may ask for evidence of your compliance, or at some point we may audit you, or we may, we would investigate if anything goes wrong and expect you to reply to our non-conformance requirements.
And that's strictly, and for the rest of the team, that's strictly where we're consigning it. If we got Leah Carter's bringing in stuff from Ozpack, you know, if this is like Coles delivering my analogy of Coles delivering the donuts, you know, that's Ozpack's issue. You know, behaviour on the site is one thing, and not letting him out if he looks like he's taking taking appropriate action if they look like they're off their chops.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the murky bits are where we consign third parties ourselves, and the store traffic. Those are the biggest practical risks that we've got, I think.
Yes, and
as long as we do everything else right.
Yep.
I don't know how everybody else feels. What do you think, Pat?
Dangerous ask in my opinion. Look, I think the reality of it is our trucks are pretty well managed. We do a good job with our truck. You know, inbound guys that we don't have any control over, we've just got to do the best they are when they're here. Like, you know, if they are coming in and not seeming to be fit for work, or their trucks don't seem to be fit for purpose, well, we've just got to deal with that as we come across it. You know, you can't preempt that stuff. As for the store, well, I suppose it's a business decision. Do we sit down and, you know, if the risk is really extreme, do we just say, well, we deliver everything? Don't come to pick it up, we'll deliver it to you. And then you've mitigated that. You've mitigated anyone driving out the gate with something not strapped correctly down. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time in the store. Most of the farmers that come in, I would say, use proper ratchet straps and strap their loads down when they're full bulkers. But once again, don't really look at that part. You know, we do.
It's never the 95% that you do right that gets you. It's always the 5% that goes wrong. You know. But anyway, let's look. I'll shut up. I'll go back to mute. That'll please everybody.
Yeah. Ash, you're not coming through.
Sorry, can't hear you.
You're going to wrap us up, Tash, or what?
I thought Ash was saying something. Or is Ash on the phone?
I think what Ash is trying to say is one of our trucks is broken down, so he needs to go sort some things out, is what he's trying to say.
Right. Okay. That's see, Ash. Awesome. So no one else has got any other questions for Sharon? I think I've taken a heap of notes, so we've got a little bit that we can work on as a group. But yeah, if no one else has got any questions, then we'll leave it at that. Now,
I've only got one.
Pardon?
I've only got one question as to if someone comes in to unload grain, for example, or unload additives, and they're clearly under the weather, but obviously we can only say, look, we don't think you're fit to drive. They can soon say, well, stuff you, I'm getting my truck and going.
Yeah.
Do we have a responsibility to, where's their responsibility? Is it to call that company, or is it to, ring the police and say, look, a truck driver's just left here, he's clearly under the weather and shouldn't be driving.
Yeah.
This is where he's headed. Look, we've basically said, when we don't believe you should be driving, how far do we extend that to? Is it an immediate call to the company to say, hey, your truck driver's just left here and we don't think he's right? Or, where's our...
Yeah, that sounds very serious if you get to the point where you think a driver is under the weather and shouldn't drive at all. And if you say, oh, mate, maybe have a rest before you go, and he's not compliant to that, I mean, you can't physically restrain him, so you don't have any control over that. And if he leaves, then you should be doing something. At least as a minimum, I would certainly say you need to contact that company straight away and say, hey, your driver's left, he's not in a good space, I've made note of this, you need to do action on it straight away, otherwise he's going to cause an accident. That could be where your responsibility stops. I guess if you really seriously think that he's in a really bad state, you could certainly call the police straight away. But at least if you do something, you're doing something.
Yeah.
If you let him go on the road knowing that he did it and actually didn't do anything, if something happened, then they could be coming to you to say your inaction of that has led to worse consequences, I guess.
Yeah. And I suppose the other follow-up to that is hours-wise, we have contractors that deliver stock feed for us, and they'll do several loads a day.
Yep.
Now, at particular times, they'll start at 4 o'clock, or they'll be here to load at 4 o'clock in the morning. So they've started from wherever they've travelled before that.
Yep.
Now they'll come back. They might come back and do 2 loads, or there has been occasion where they've come back to load again. Now, if we ask them, are they within hours? Is that the only thing we need to do? If they answer yes, I'm not going to check their logbook, and I probably wouldn't know what I'm looking at. Is our responsibility just to ask that question to say, look, mate, this is, you were here at 4 o'clock this morning, it's now 4 o'clock this afternoon. Are you within your hours?
Well, that would certainly ring some alarm bells straight away. If he's there 12 hours, he might have some sort of BFM accreditation where he can do a 14-hour day on his work diary. But if you see him in 12 hours and he's still loading, you don't know where, he's still got another couple hours to go to get to his destination, then I would certainly be doing something along that line.
I mean, potentially he can say to me, no, mate, I'm running a 14-hour book. I'll load here. It's going to take me now. Then I'm going to park up down the bay and rest. Now, I don't know that he's going to do that. Yeah. But that's what I've got to go on and face.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, what control over that do you have, or nothing? But I've asked the question, and I'm happy that he's sort of come up with a reasonable response, and he looks okay, and you tick sort of as much as you can tick off, then that's all you can do. Yeah.
I think the 2 scenarios that you bring up, Pat, is if you think somebody's going to kill your kids up the street, ring the police. That's the acid test for me. But the other one, the hauliers we use for taking stock feed in and out, we've actually gone through a fair bit of compliance with them. In the first instance, I wouldn't keep it to myself, but I'd actually make sure that somebody's on the phone to those companies and saying, just as a quiet aside, Peter, or whatever, the other guy at Broadbent or whatever it is, just a bit concerned. His hours are all right, aren't they? And then document that call or that email or something. So you maybe go to their employers as we've selected them for being compliant, and raise their. But a lot of those drivers, they've got these funny and we shouldn't set ourselves up to be experts in it. God forbid we be experts in anything. But they got these. There's a whole different category of 14-hour day. There's all sorts of. There's about 3 levels of drivers, aren't there? Sort of it's in terms of mass and working hours and fatigue management and super fatigue management and God knows what else.
Yeah.
That they're probably covered by. Yeah. And I think the higher you get in those, the more strict it becomes about the compliance and the reporting of those sorts of things for the companies that are actually doing that. So
That's right.
don't be afraid to raise a question, Pat. But I suspect the answer will be they'll be compliant under some sort of super licensing arrangements.
So they may be under what they call basic fatigue management, which is another accreditation that they can have, like you guys have MASS accreditation. The BFM allows them to have a 14-hour day rather than a 12-hour day. And then the next level is advanced fatigue. We don't have a lot of clients on that. That's quite a very specific type of accreditation, but there's a lot of levels of standards that you need to comply with, and you do get audited externally on the requirements of those accreditations, as you know, with MASS.
This is why, as a business, we do not want to be using Mickey Mouse operators or one-man bands. Essentially, in anything we do. Yeah. There's just too much risk involved in it, not only from a chain of responsibility point of view, but the new corporate manslaughter laws that come into effect overlie all of this as well. So, that go and kill our driver in the process. You won't just be in front of the beak for COR. You'll be in front of the beak for corporate manslaughter stuff.
Yeah, and
so it's deadly serious, isn't it?
And that could be part of your control measures in your risk of third parties. We only engage with the larger reputable companies because we know that they're going to be safe and they'll have compliance requirements all covered off for you.
Yeah. Good.
Lovely.
Back to you, Tash.
Thanks. If no one else has got any questions, I think that'll wrap it up.
If you do think of something when we get off the call, certainly run it through Tash, and Tash can email me anything that you think of. We'll try and help you out with it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time, Sharon. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
And I might chat to you a bit later about that third-party form that you were talking about.
Yep,
if you could send that through, we can have a bit of a look. That'd be great.
No worries.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for jumping on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.